Okay, my good friends, Roger once again. Let's just start off by saying that this is not going to be for kids specifically, because I'm going to be showing body parts that are, anatomical. It's not porn. It's everybody's got one or the other, so I'm going to be showing that kind of stuff. It's up to you what you want to do about showing your kids these kind of things, but I think any adult is capable of handling what I'm going to be showing, although their mind is going to be exploded. These are people walking here. This is a foot. Now, I am pretty deep into anatomy and so forth. I've worked with some of the top anatomists in the world, and nobody's giving me any dispute about what I'm showing. That's a foot, and that's the bone coming up the leg, and these are where the tendons are, and it's eroded, and this is what the flesh turns into, is this red powdery dust and clay and so forth, depending upon the conditions it's in. Now, like I say, I'm going to show you a little bit of anatomy, and then we're going to go into some body parts that are going to show that these, that we're going to talk about it. We'll discuss it. And I'm going to probably, well, I know I am going to bring in Brian Forrester's work. Now, he has nothing to do with me. I'm not associated to him. He's not supporting anything that I say, but he's asking the questions. I want to try to answer some of them. So here we go. All right, this is the kind of detail you have to get to before you can really understand biology and the anatomy of the human body and where the veins and arteries are and the difference between arteries and veins and capillaries and all of that stuff. And, how the foot is constructed and where the ligaments and tendons and all of that stuff is very, very important to be extremely detailed in your knowledge of chemistry, biology, the whole 9 yards, anatomy. Everything is tied together. So this is what I do. I'm sort of a geek at this kind of stuff. I can't help myself. I found things that I couldn't explain, and now I'm trying to work my way through it. So let's work our way through it. Okay, so you see the size of this foot, and you see the size of those people, and you saw the thumbnail that I had on here. Hold on, let's see if we can find what I'm talking about, because I have so much stuff on this that it's pretty amazing. Here it is. Where is it? I got a lot of penises. You see this one, the penis house? Where's the other one? This one here is your typical pagan penis, uncircumcised. I'm telling you, the earth was just covered with them. Look at this. I don't know what the heck is going on with this. I mean, what can I say? Here it is right here. Now, look at the size of the people here. And I mean, what can I say? That could have been from that guy. I don't know. I'm not going to try to make any comparisons about what should or shouldn't be. Now, this is obviously appears to be circumcised to me. I mean, unless it's just some natural rock formation. But let me show you the kind of other natural rock formations that might accommodate something like that. All right, now you saw part A. This is part B. And what is this? Well, you can decide for yourself. I say it's a vagina. Now, it appears to be human, and I can tell you why I can say it appears to be human on top of the fact of the look. Now, secondarily, before we get too deep into the vagina, this little seam right here, I'm sorry, I can't help myself. We're all adults here, come on. Now, you see that seam? That little crack right down there, a little tiny crack. That is what's called I call it the seam of the blastula. For some reason I call it vegetal seam. I don't remember why I came up with that name, but it might be accurate. I don't know. But I'm going to call it the vegetal seam. And what happens is when the blastula ball of a baby starts to grow inside the womb, it snaps inside and then it seals itself. And that's the seal. And it's not as strong as all the regular normal tissue. And when things soak and bloat and so forth, that seal pops open. Sometimes it pops wide open. And this one here, you can just barely see that but it is there. There's no question whatsoever. You can see it. And it runs right the whole length, and you know, the fornix and all that stuff is here. Now, as I told you, I have literally hundreds of people that report to me, and they don't want to be involved because of, you know, nobody really wants to get their name associated to this stuff. You know, it's kind of over the top, and people have a very, very, very difficult time with this. Even the people that are invested in looking into these things. And you know, I'm going to bring up some people that are looking and asking questions, and I know they're having a hard time accepting the answers, and the answers are pretty obvious now. So I'm going to go with this as a vagina. Now, what is this? That right there is a baby's face. Now, this seam side here is nice and even and nothing. You see this is bloated out here? I had a forensic pathologist, I believe that's what they said they were, said that they have seen this in extended drowning cases of pregnant women. And the baby will be like, try to be pushed out through, I don't know, you know, that's what he said. He thought it was a baby's face. That's what I was told. Yes or no, I can't say one way or the other. If you could, but this thing is there. This is the Tracian womb cave, they call this. I could call it the same thing now. And I have a ton of this stuff, a ton of it. So it's not like there's only one. You know what I'm saying? They're all over the place. Even in Sonoma, that's called the birthing cave. Come on, kids, it's time to get out. I'm telling you, and they're everywhere around the world, and some of them, yikes. When I tell you yikes, I'm talking yikes. Here's one. This is what they call a breech birth. Come out backwards. What do we got here? All right, there was blue people here, it appears to me. Now, whether or not this is just transition metal changes, I don't know. But I see a lot of blue, and you know what you're seeing there is blue. Here's another one. Now, this is out of ice, but I'm telling you right now, even out of the ice areas, you see all these things in here. This is some kind of tissue, but it's ice at the same time. I don't know. Some things are very, very, very strange and hard to explain. Now this one here, look at it. This is in the Baltics. This is a vagina. I mean, this is what they call the vaginal ripples, and they have this little surface to them, that structural fabric, and of course that's the vegetal seam. Now I'm going to show you one, the biggest one that I have found, and I've been looking around at a lot of vaginas, so, and that is a good size vagina. Now, these again, this is that same, you know, ripple, and this right here is the vaginal seam. I call it the vaginal seam, and that is where the blastula comes together, and inside there is the stomach. So this is where the vagina fused, and it creates a mat. Oh, that's right, I call it a vegetal mat. And that surface covers the seam, and that is the seam right there. That's what I'm saying. I'm pretty sure of what I'm saying here. Now, the earth is covered with creatures that were so enormous that nobody in their right mind could ever possibly have expected this. I'm not pointing any fingers at, oh, these people are idiots. No, this is so hard for anybody to get their mind around that they've always just turned away and literally run away. And I mean nasty, get nasty and run away. And that's what's happened to me for 10 years. So this is, you take it or leave it, it's up to you. All right, you think these creatures weren't enormous? Look at this. This is striated muscle. This little block, more, you know, magnification. And then we end up with this. Now, don't forget, look at this. You have this little band, and then this little band, and then a break. These are in blocks. They come in blocks. Let me show you something. All right, go back and look if you're confused. You see these, and you see these? This is connective tissue. These are sarcomeres, and they break right across here. These are blocks of sarcomeres, and this is a block, and they cut it right down the side of the block. These holes in Petra are release that allows the moisture to come out. They carved this out of wet flesh, and I'm talking, these are sarcomeres. You saw the magnification we had to go to get to be able to see these sarcomeres a second ago. And so the size of the creatures was just absolutely enormous. And inside of Petra, you can see the rest of the muscle that is, it was just carved out of muscle and flesh. That's it. This is blood and so forth. Any anatomist can, there's no anatomist in the world or biologist that should be able to ignore this. And they are ignoring it and dismissing it because it's too much to be accepted. Truth is just not allowed at this moment in my world. Okay, how I got into this was because my property here is just loaded with mud fossils, which are from giants. That's a giant fingertip. That's the fingernail of the giant fingertip. And I've looked at it very carefully, and if that doesn't convince you, I have DNA tests on it, and I also have this from the side that has the grip skin, which is the fingerprint. And there's this fingerprint, one ridge in the fingerprint, and the same as in yours. See these sweat pores? There's sweat pores and the same as sweat pores. My finger is the same width as one ridge in a fingerprint, and of that giant fingertip I just showed you. And I had this DNA tested, so I have the DNA test. They're online. You can look at it, giant human. There's 3 tests I had done, one on this, and then another one of mine. Hold on, let's see if I can find it quickly. This is right here. It's a palm, that's a hand, a left hand, and you have this little ridge running down your hand. It's a little tendon. Then the bumper pad runs around. This is a fleshy bumper pad looking thing. And this is the grip skin again. The other one, remember I showed you the fingerprints? It's a different kind of skin on your pads of your hand and your feet and your tips of your fingers and so forth. They call it grip skin. And it peels right off just like that. It just peels right off. And it's dense with silicon, iridium, and different heavy, scrappy, tough stuff. We need to do a lot of analysis on this. And everything changes according to to where it was entombed. So one thing may turn into clay or mud looking thing just like this, which I call mud fossils, and other things may turn into selenite. And it depends on the chemistry of what is soaked in, basically. It's called nucleophilic substitution. And that's something that we need to start looking into deeply, too, according to transition metal movements in aqueous solutions for long durations of time. We can we can transition basically anything into almost anything else using nucleophilic substitution. It's something that's been more or less overlooked, I think. Anyway, there's so much to this. But again, if you're not versed in all of the different sciences, and I mean, you have to really look at them. You can't just say, oh, I read the book and it told me this or that. No, you have to use your own mind now, because what we were told just didn't stack up. It doesn't stack up in physics either. And that's all been coming down the line too. So it's time to really stop and think, and not just dismiss, because it's become a dismissal educational system. Dismiss everything except what we tell you. And if you come to us with something that we don't like, we will fail you. So don't do that. And they can't. They call that peer review. If your peers will destroy you. You start showing things to them that they don't like, and they put you so far out of the box, you never get back in. And that's where I am. That's where Velikovsky was. And that's where all the people, the Tesla, anybody that did something that they didn't like and stood up for themselves, they just would destroy them. Now, I can't be destroyed because I have too much evidence. It's just a matter of time, basically. Okay, this is, again, new research. They never even knew this layer existed in a human body until just a few years ago. And a lot of that was due to the research that I did on the mud fossils. I'm not kidding you. It's that crazy. And these black balls here are they lock in this collagen web. And these are the springs that open the bags back up. And they're filled with fluids. That's the mucosa, which is their skin, or it's the lining, it's a membrane that separates what you don't want getting into here. And that you have to have mucus, and you have to have serosa, and you have to have bacteria living in all these bags. It's all kinds of different bacteria living in there. And they are the things that protect you by squirting out mucus to keep that stuff away. Or they also can produce enzymes and catalysts which will go out and kill the chemistry that's trying to invade you. But if you don't have the correct bacteria in your body, you can't do that. That's why people are immunocompromised. They don't have good probiotics. I'm telling you, that's a fact. Now, this is the webbing of the fabric of just below your skin, so that everything can move around and come back to where it's supposed to, according to these black balls. Well, guess what? If it erodes in the ocean, let's say, what would happen? Well, here's what would happen. It's exactly what would happen right there. And these are the black balls, and the reason all this stuff is growing on them is because they're loaded with biological substances that plants want to eat. That's what they live off of. You buy blood meal and bone meal, and your plants will grow like crazy. They love that stuff. And this is nothing more than bone meal and blood meal. That's what it is. Now, that's that mucosa. That's the interstitium layer, which has all the balls embedded here. They're falling out. You see them? And the rest of it's mud, because blood turns into mud. Bloody red tissue turns into clay, red clay and mud, and if it's real dry, it just turns into like dusty red, sandy stuff and so forth. Okay, my good friends, as I said, we're going to be referring to Brian Forrester because he's the one that's asking the questions. He's doing the real work, but I'm not seeing him embracing the things that I have presented to him. We've gone back and forth a little bit here and there, but, he follows the rule like my mother used to tell me. If you can't say something nice, don't say anything at all. So I don't think he embraces anything that I say. So don't attribute anything that I say to Brian Forrester. However, under the Fair Use Act, I am just going to refer to the things that he does say and hopefully present some evidence to answer the questions he's asking. All right, so let's start looking right now. Brian, thank you, my good friend, as always, and I appreciate your gracious responses. Here we go.
So most academics believe quite strongly that all the ancient pre-Columbian work done in the city of Cusco was created by the Inca people, including this somewhat megalithic wall made out of very hard basalt stone.
Okay, now, what I want to say is, when they did this, it was not hard, and basalt is just strictly a product of the environment that the flesh was in, and was invaded by what kind of transition metals and converted to what type of stone. Because you can have tendon, can be all kinds of different stone. It can be CaCO3, calcium carbonates, which is limestone. It can be basalt. It can turn into selenite. It doesn't matter, it depends on what it's being invaded by, the chemistry of the nucleophilic substitution of the original biology. Now, if you go back here and look, you see these snakes carved into here? This was all carved when it was wet. These are out. Now, and they've carved them in. I believe a lot of these were ground up flesh and created into stone in blocks. So they had a couple of different ways. They actually ground up bodies. I'm serious. And my counter in my house is a ground up body. And I'll show you that in a second, because it has tendon and all the different blood and no metals, literally none, in that matrix. And if you looked at this with a microscope, you could see the same stuff I'm going to show you in a second. I got a feeling. That will tell you one way or the other. And the casing stones on the Great Pyramid and so forth, those were made of ground up flesh. I looked it over very carefully. From, again, Brian Forrester's work. And and I showed it. I have literally hundreds of videos explaining this process and how this crazy stuff was here. And it was here after the Great Flood. Everything was wet. It was all soft. As I showed you, Petra was carved out of soft flesh, and literally everything, all those walls that are absolutely flawless, those were just chopped out of chunks and put together. This is ground up, I believe, and made into nice, even blocks and put together like that, and then they could make this all fancy little snakes and stuff. The snakes are a big time thing. All right, this is the countertop in my house, and it's made out of ground up body parts. And I can tell you that almost absolutely. This is tendon material. And you're going to see tendon up close and personal during this video. And that is literally the only piece, well, I didn't look everywhere, but that's the only piece that was obvious of metal in the whole entire thing. Now, what you're looking at is the black is magnetite, and the reddish brown looking stuff is hematite, which is blood. And the clear looking quartz stuff is more than likely from the bone material. And what they did was they ground it all up, and then from alchemy they extracted the metals and the fluids, and then they just let it pile up. There it is right there, look. That's all it was, as far as I can find, is for metals. And metals are in the blood, and that is attached to the hematite, magnetite, which is one of the waste metal. You know, magnetite is the blood after it uses its oxygen. Now, that's tendon. That is absolutely tendon, no question whatsoever. And there are bits and pieces of it everywhere. It's just all ground up, like they put it in a grinder or something. And they show people grinding up people in China. I showed that. The guy's got a gigantic, really nasty looking wheel. He's grinding up people. And that was carved into the walls thousands of years ago. So this is not something that is a stretch. Now, I'm not going to go any further into his video here, because he's saying, look at this stone wall over here was made by the Spaniards or whoever. But the original people that nobody knew who they were made these absolutely fabulous things. But they had high-tech equipment. All right, I did a video on this the other day. This is from down in, I believe it's in Bolivia. And this is some kind of a giant tracked vehicle. I mean, this is pretty good size. And it had wheels, obviously, that were down here that sunk into whatever this was that was wet at the time. The whole thing was wet. It had tank tracks. This was designed to be used in this kind of an environment, to do this kind of work. And I believe the work that was done is to be chopping out these chunks. They must have had a big thing that hung over, and then they dropped them somehow, and then they put them up in those walls. That's why they fit so perfect, because they were just wet putty. Now you see how this is all moving back and forth here? That would be what would happen if you had a thing going out there digging like this. It would shake it. These are the stabilizers, or, you know, originally I thought they were wheels, but now I think they were stabilizers, that they just sunk in to stabilize this thing from going that way. Now, these, they will help doing it this way as well, but they could have been, originally I thought it was on wheels and driving up, but it wasn't. Somebody dropped this out of the air. Somehow, that's all I can tell you, because they couldn't have got it here without making tracks. If it was on wheels, and they stop up here, so you tell me how they got there. Now, as far as I'm concerned, they were chopping these chunks out and making the walls in Peru. And I'll show you the ones that they made, and normally they made them out of nice clear tendon, and I'm showing you the size of these creatures. A tendon was 6 or 10 or 20 feet thick, literally. Well, you see those Baalbek stones? Those are tendon fibers, or a single fiber. I'm not kidding you. I have a video on that too. I have those exact same things here, only they're they're tiny, they're microscopic, really. But in the size of the creatures I'm showing you, if you can't understand what we're looking at, and after seeing Petra and those sarcomeres, all I can tell you is It said there was giants in the earth in those days, and then after that there was more giants. I think the earth is made of giants. It seems to me the size of the things are just so spectacularly huge that nobody can get their head around this. This is a whole new era we have to think about. If you really want to confront reality, and I hear people asking questions, just like Brian, he's asking a lot of questions. I think we need to confront this with some answers. And the only way you're going to get the answers is to really pay attention to what you're seeing and not just discount it out of hand because it's just too much to handle. And it is. It's very, very hard to handle at this point. All right, I showed you how I think they chop these things out, and these are the kind of irregular ones. It would have chopped out and thrown on a truck or however they got it down here. I don't know how they moved them down here, but that's the machine, I believe, that cut these. And some of them were cut still using bone and so forth, where they didn't really want to do that, but they must have decided, oh, that's big enough, it'll hold up, it's got enough structural support. Like they even used one here. Now I don't know why they used the junk here, but normally they wanted to use nice clear ones, like these ones up here at the top. They probably ran out of the good ones and then they ran into this nasty stuff, and that's all biology rotting away basically. And you can see them coming out and eroding away into the fleshiness that they are. That's where they came from. Now, you wanted a nice clear tendon, and I'll show you the mats that they used that had the bumps. The reason they have the bumps on a lot of them is because they use mats. Let me show you the mats. Now, don't forget, you have to know anatomy. You have to understand the biology here. A tendon is something that attaches to a muscle. The muscle pulls, the tendon anchors into some substrate of your bone or whatever. Now, these balls, they each have a ball on the end, which is an anchor. This one's pulled out. This is an injury. That ball is supposed to be locked in here, and that strap goes through these holes. You see the holes? They call them Chinese finger traps. That way the tendon can slide back and forth, and the strap takes up the slack. But you still get anchored here. It basically is like that interstitium. Now, what they did when they took these huge tendons, the mats, and they would just break the tips off here. And then they would make the walls out of them. That's why they have the bumps, and they probably just pinch them back off because they were wet at the same time they were taken. And these, because those were all wet too. They did all this work basically at the same time. And then after that, they had the secondary construction. That's what Brian's asking about. How could they? Nobody understood the original construction, and it's because it was made out of body parts. Nobody's ever going to accept this until they stop and get out of their mindset of just accepting everything that was told to them. This is what it is. If you can't accept what you see, this is microscopic. I believe it's a human body, somebody's injury, and they checked it out, and that's the ball. Now let's go a little deeper. All right, you know how that other one had like a bunch of straps coming down? They would have come over with balls attached to something. What they did here, it looks to me like they were experimenting on the best way to make these walls work. And they ended up using this. Now, if you could see right in there, if you could look, let me see if I can home in on that a little better. I don't know if you can see that or not, but this little pinch mark right there, and that is literally blood still in there. And that is where that strap would have come over and attached to a ball next to it. See, this is the good stuff. They just chopped these out of those tendon mats, pinched off the little straps, and they're all different shapes. That's fine. They just put them up together and they just settled in like putty. So that, and some of them, there was some really spectacular artisans back there that did work that's just mind-blowing. But a lot of this is just, they cleaned it up and moved it around and then plopped another one in and then moved that one around to fit this one, and that's how they made it all fit in together. And the settling would just keep them fit as we see them now, exactly flawlessly. All right, I'm going to show you something in anatomy which is, you may not want to watch because it's the body ripped open. But what you're seeing here is the skin of the flesh over the top of tendon. And that tendon fibrils are very coarse and straight and no breaks in them. They can break, which obviously they do, but then you run into this down here, which is the sarcomeres, and they attach right at this level, right here, to the tendon, and that's the way it works. Now, in the human body, or in any creature that has tendons attached to muscles, here's the way it works. All right, all that I care you to see is that there is places like this, which is basically 100% tendon, and then they transition into muscle, and then the muscle takes over. Now, the muscles have the certain fibers in them, which is the sarcomeres, which I showed you, but this is the striations right here of the tendons. You see these little, there's a zillion fibers in them, and every one of them has an attachment at the other end. All right, these are tendons and ligaments, and they have to attach with a ball in a little tiny socket with those fibers coming out. And I'm going to show you some of those fibers on the earth. All right, this is the tendon as it comes down to the end of the little fibrils. Each one of those I just showed you has a ball on the end. These are the fibrils. You see them? They come in these little hexagonal shapes. Isn't that amazing? That's all I can tell you is what I'm seeing, and what now could be actually tested, because the chemistry is well, I understand it pretty well now, and I think anybody else will too, because we can find the blood supplies, we can find the hematite and the magnetite, we can see all of the different chemistry that indicates exactly what it was. All right, I showed you the living tendon, and this is what the tendon is, and these are the nice cuts, and they built all these walls. Why they did this, I have no idea. Maybe they were worried about another flood, no clue. Invasion, again, total speculation, but I can tell you what, this was done when it was wet. These are tendons. They slabbed them off and somehow moved them back to here and put them up wet, and they just all fit exactly perfectly. That's why they're there. They're not still there today. And the tendon is the best stuff, because there's, well, let me show you a real good shot of a tendon. All right, here you go. There's the Achilles tendon. Now that's primarily these changed into those little tiny fibers, and then you saw there's a million of them. They're not just one big strap here and another big strap. There's literally thousands of fibers in here, and every one of them ends up locking into a tiny little anchor at the other end, otherwise they pull out. Now, every one of them has to be separated from every other one of them. That's why you see all these fibers all over the earth, and they're separated, and they have no explanation for any of these things. Well, they're because they're fibers of tendon, and that's what you see here, and that's what they were cutting. There's virtually no biology in here. They're just tough as hell, and very little blood, but there is blood here and there. You can find it. Now there's a granite slab. That's all that is right there is ground up flesh. There's red blood, black blood, and tendinous material. And they extracted with alchemy, or however they did it. They used some kind of salts or acids or whatever. And then they mixed it all up into a brew, and then they pulled out all of the effluent, and then it bound to the effluent was the metals, and occasionally a little piece here and there they would miss, like the one I showed you, but that's the only one I could find in mine. And if you look through this, you'd have a hard time finding any in here either. But that is the only way that I can see why anything would turn to this particular composition. Especially the ones I showed you on my countertop. I mean, there's no other way you're going to account for that. It's tendon. Now, they would have started with something like this when it was wet. Of course, that's now a solid rock. But that's the tendinous material. They would have been grinding, and then you have all these little blocks and chunks. And your red and your black. Of course, the black is from, well, let me show you a lung. All right, lungs just get saturated with blood. That thing came out of the ground, and every one of these little dots leaked blood. And this is the actual alveoli of the lung, the same as it is here. You see it? This other lung, I had DNA tested. I drilled up inside the red little flap up there and got the blood out of there. This was actually the blood that dripped, literally dripped out of this one over here. I didn't need to get it tested to see it was blood. Now, let me show you something else. All right, this is obviously a lung, and this was all the blood vessels going down into it and the main source of the air going through. But this is the red blood and black. Red and black is two different oxygenated states of iron. The red is hematite, which means it's got 3 oxygens attached. So it's Fe2, which is iron 2, and then O3, oxygen 3, and then Fe2O2 is black. It's just a difference in the transition metal colors, and I will show you that because there's a whole variety of colors. That's why you find so many colors in stones and opals and all that stuff. It's the transition metals that were in the blood. You see this? Aqueous. This is always in water and in wet conditions, and these different colored transition metals, which are all in here. Here's your iron, and all of them in here, they move back and forth because they take electrons and give electrons and so forth. And that's how your body works. Your body's unstable, and this is what makes it stable. Well, it makes it, lets it live being unstable. Once you die, this makes it stable. These find things to attach to. Sometimes they change colors and they become, different flashy looking colors, and sometimes they just turn into muddy looking colors. Sometimes they have all different colors in them. That's a lung, and that lung had all different colors of blood in it because the blood has all different metals in it. And opals are another spectacular source of seeing all these different colors. I have a heart, well, let me show you. I don't have it, but I can show you a picture of it. All right, this was in an extremely clean, watery solution where there was a lot of extra transition metal blood, and it found its way to the tissues that wanted to attach to it to make themselves stable. And that's what happened. And then this is just raw blood. And then it was laying on this side because the heavier metals will float to the bottom. This is the lighter red plasma, which would lift to the top. So this was together, obviously, and then this side was down. But you can see how perfectly it is adapted to the different transition metals. That's the colors. I just showed you them. And they found something to attach to become stable. That's how mud fossils work. But normally they're going to come out because they're in the mud. It's called nucleophilic substitution. If this was in a condition, and I just did Mitchell Hedges' skull, and that is real, 100%, no question whatsoever. And it was in a place where the only thing that could invade was silicates, and that had to be in like a extremely wet, continuously moving cenote or something like that, where it was in a very, very exceptional condition. And these are as well. Only these were infused with a lot of extra transition metals. With the Mitchell Hedges skull, all there was silicates, and silicates take over for carbon. You see, it's right underneath the carbon. That's why. You have all these quartz. Quartz are in the veins. Veins are actually veins, and they fill in with quartz. All right, you're going to see this again at the end, and I want you to pay attention to these striations. And then we're going to see this at the very end, and I want you to pay attention to how these fuse into this actual plate, basically. This is really what's under your skin. It's your muscles and then your tendons and all the membranes and all of these different striations and muscle bundles, and they attach so unbelievably solidly. Otherwise you just fall apart. And it's just absolutely incredible, the design of the human body. And you really got to do some digging around to see, the honest, true structure of everything, instead of oh, this is just muscle, that's just tendon, that's just bone. Well, let's take a look at it close. And then you can see, like see right here, Remember I showed you how the tendon attaches to the muscle? Here it is right there. You see it? And these are abrupt transitions. So they attach and then they abruptly turn into muscle. And that's that. Can you see that? No, you can't. You see that one right there? That's what you call a serious attachment of your, your chest muscles to an anchor, and everything is anchored. And if I ripped my shoulder moving some of the stuff I was moving, and when you rip a tendon, you in trouble. They got to be locked back in solid. You actually got to bolt them back in. They don't really reattach all that well by themselves, I don't think. Mine, I had surgery, and it was okay. Came back all right. Now, I showed you Petra was just flesh, and it's very thin layers of flesh similar to this. This is the breasts of a giant. All right. If you know what to look for and you understand anatomy and the muscles and so forth, you'll understand what we were just looking at is this. And it is all over. It's everywhere. You see that? That's not just formed like that. These are the actual emplacements where the muscle fibers run that hold in these muscles. There's things that we just have never ever taken into account. We just got to start over again and really think about it. I know it's stunning, and it's very, very hard for your mind to get to this point. But believe me, I've been doing this a long time, and I was afraid to talk for a long time, and now it's just time to just say what it is. What it is what it is. You either deal with it or you just walk around in circles. Now, I've come to the point where I've been dealing with things. And people have to, I know it sounds like I'm making a big thing out of this, but it's not. It's a thing that is avoided so badly that it's just hard to believe how hard it is to accept this for so many people. So I'm going to just leave it at that. But if everybody just all you got to do is just think a little bit different. Take your mind outside that box and look for yourself, not just because all I ever get from the people that I try to present this to is, oh, just look that up. Oh, you're just crazy. Look it up. We know all this stuff. We've been testing this, and we know what we're doing for hundreds of years. And here you are, just a nobody in the woods. And well, I am a nobody in the woods, but I can tell you what, my eyes are open, and I can see, and I understand. I understand chemistry and physics and all that stuff. So don't tell me I don't understand. And I understand what they're saying. It's not that I just have my own opinion. I understand exactly what they're saying, and I understand a lot of it makes sense to them. But once you start to break it down into the chemistry, into the biology, into the physiology, the physics of everything, the whole thing, and then what was written, you have to study that too. You got to study Hesiod and Ovid and even like the Bible and all the Sumerian texts, all that stuff. It all plays a role. Velikovsky was the most important person in history at this point, in recent history, because he did the actual research that pointed out all these things. And without that, I probably would never have thought to start examining things in that way. But even the top people now in physics and everywhere else, I bring up Velikovsky's name, they laugh. They laugh. Either that or they just have no idea who he was. But there is no quarter given to anyone that speaks outside the realm of acceptance. And I have been outside the realm of acceptance since I was breathing oxygen. And I will until I stop breathing oxygen, I'm sure. But that's where I want to be, is where reality is. Seems like crazy, but it's reality.